his he was in charge of the UFO investigation at Wright Field from to middle of 51 till the end of 53. The middle of 53. So for about 2 years, he was the head of Project Blue Book. Now, this was a time when his superiors, or let's put it this way, the Pentagon was more open-minded on UFOs. They had a short period there where they decided that let's just look at these like we haven't looked at them before.
Why did he die at age 37? That's
he died very young. He died very young, and I talked to one of the people that worked for him, and he said that he was not surprised that Ruppelt died young, because he said this was a type A personality. He was very so it's unfortunate that that he didn't live later on because they probably would have had better medical chances of living, but he died when we didn't have a lot of treatment for heart problems.
Sounds very curious. He died in California.
Yeah. So after he got out of the service, he decided to write a book on his experiences with UFOs, because it was quite interesting. Keogh had written Flying Saucers Are Real and Flying Saucers from Outer Space, both which were very good sellers. So Ruppelt added his book, which was The Inside Story, and it wasn't a bestseller, but it did pretty good. It did fairly well. He first he wrote for True Magazine. He got $2,000 for True Magazine. He said that was the down payment on his house.
Wow. So they say he died of a heart attack with no one really knowing, I guess, of a fatal heart attack, but that's what they said, right? That Edward Ruppelt died at age 39 from a heart attack. 37.
Yeah.
And you read his book, and that's what got you interested.
That's what got me started, and I started reading other things. And the other thing was that in junior high, and probably the reason I read his book, this happened about the same time. During the Christmas vacation, we had a snowstorm, and I had shoveled the walk, and I was getting ready to make in the oven. I was getting ready to make myself some cinnamon toast after I came in to warm up, and it's one of those winter storms where you had lightning and thunder, and I'm by the electric stove, and there was a radio on the electric stove, and our chimney got hit by lightning. And when it did, there was a big spark that jumped across the top of the stove, and the radio went nuts, and it was still going nuts. It was just static and everything. Nothing. Broadcast was interrupted, and I didn't know what it was. So I wanted to see if the oven was affected somehow by this lightning strike. So I open up the oven, and inside the oven there's this little ball of light about as big as a quarter, sitting not on the grate but just above the grate in the oven. And when I opened the door, it started to roll end over end. It wasn't touching the grate; it just rolled end over end to the end of the grate, and then sort of fell off and exploded. So I think that's how I got interested in UFOs, because of this thing. Because when my father came home, and he was a chemist, and I asked him about this thing. I mean, it scared the hell out of me. It knocked me on my backside. It was like a cherry bomb going off inside the house. It was so loud, the explosion. So it scared the heck out of me. So then my father got home, and I said, Dad, do you know what this is? And he said, no. He said, that's what the library's for.
Oh.
So I went down to the library. Yeah, so I went down to the library and looked up. I found out that this phenomenon was called ball lightning.
Wow.
And it said in the Encyclopedia Britannica that most scientists did not believe it existed.
Oh,
so I tried to read. Yeah, so I tried to read everything I could on it. There were magazine articles and scientific magazine articles and reports in the newspapers and magazines, but they seemed to end about in the 30s. Somebody had written an article on ball lightning that said there was nothing to it. That it was caused by, he had a whole list of things that caused it. And so if you ever see a UFO debunking book, that's what this article was. It debunked ball lightning.
Okay.
And some of the same explanations he gave are some of the same explanations for UFOs. So then I started reading I read Ruppelt's book, and I recognized that, hey, this guy, his name was Humphreys. He was a meteorologist for the Weather Bureau. And because of his article, ball lightning disappeared from the scientific press for almost until the late 50s. People didn't write articles about it and stuff.
So you were always searching as an investigative reporter in your own mind, or research, because you wanted to find out what was causing it, right? You were
right. So
concern.
then I read about UFOs, and it seemed like the same thing was happening with UFOs. That they weren't looking at it seriously enough, and they were just like Humphreys. People were coming up with explanations that didn't fit too well. So that's like I said, this both happened about the same time. So I can't say which one. It's hard for me to figure out. Remember which one was the most inspiring. But I kind of think that the ball lightning got me started, and then I read Ruppelt's book, and I said, yeah, well, the same thing's happening with UFOs. So.
Now, he was working with the Air Force Intelligence Headquarters at the time?
He was working with Air Technical Intelligence. And what they did out there is they would try to get pieces of enemy or hostile aircraft, or get hostile aircraft itself, planes that crash and stuff, and evaluate them. That was the main function out there, is to keep ahead of developments in that would affect the Air Force. So it was Air Technical Intelligence, which is about actual pieces of things. So when they got the UFO problem, I mean, these are people that these are engineers and things. They want to work with things that they can touch and feel, and UFOs is not one of those things. But that's what he worked there. And as a first lieutenant, he had a major's job, which is rather surprising. And he wasn't he had experience in the Second World War as an enlisted man, but he was a brand new officer when he went to Wright-Patterson. He was a reserve officer called up for the Korean War. So when he went to Wright-Patterson, he was a brand new officer. He had military experience, but he didn't have a lot of officer experience.
Now, he got in touch with a Long Beach writer, didn't he, when they put out a article on him in True magazine? He got in touch with a
he got in touch with editors of True.
Jim Fallon, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jim Feller wrote articles about him in the California Press.
Okay.
He got in, and he wrote an article for True magazine, and it was rather skeptical, and the editor told him, you should make this you should make this more not negative, but you should more middle of the road. So that's what he did. And that was his first thing, and like I said, he got $2,000, which at the time was a lot of money. It wasn't like it is today. $2,000 was a lot of money for that article, so that went for a down payment of his home, which at the time, homes didn't cost that much.
Now, who is Professor Swords or Sword? How do you say that? Professor Swords helped him with his original manuscript.
He is the professor at Western Michigan University. One of the things he was interested in is environmental sciences. Later on, he became one of the important people in CUFOS. Because they had a lot of scientists that Mark Rodiger and Swords and Valet. They all, they were all in, CUFOS, helping Hynek out.
Okay, they did CUFOS. Were they some of the original founders of CUFOS?
Well, Swords wasn't a founder, but he came in later. I don't think Rodiger was a founder. He came in later. There were a number of UFO people that helped Hynek start out. Sherm Larson was head of the NICAP Chicago affiliate, and then he helped out Hynek get established and start out. And he actually got the NICAP files. So he had the NICAP files in his office. Another CUFOS member bought the NICAP files. Well,
so they got this first?
Yeah, I mean the NICAP files were sitting in a warehouse for maybe 5 or 6 years. So who knows?
Oh wow!
So when when they were sold, the